Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mike. You guys are rocking with me on Mikey's Intellectual Corner. On today's episode, we are diving into History Civilis. This is the Battle of Zama 202 BC. Without further ado, we're just gonna dive right into it. Let's roll.
After Rome suffered yet another stunning defeat at the Battle of Cannae, people were in the mood for a radical change in direction. At the tender age of 19, Publius Cornelius Scipio was one of the 6 military tribunes attached to the 2nd Legion at Cannae. We don't have a reliable account of how he survived, but my best guess is that he was in one of the small groups that managed to push their way through the encircling Carthaginians and make a run for it. Scipio had an unusual post-Cannae career. He was awarded the command of an army in his 20s, despite the fact that he had been elected to none of the prerequisite offices. He then spent several years successfully campaigning against the Carthaginians in Spain. Very successfully, so much so that his army tried to hail him as a king. Scipio put a stop to it, but the Senate noticed. When Scipio returned to Rome, he was already the most popular living Roman. He was elected consul in a landslide election, even though he was technically ineligible for the office for a couple of different reasons. But Rome had been traumatized by war, and seemed perfectly comfortable getting a little loosey-goosey with the law. Scipio used his connections in the Senate to get himself named as the governor of Sicily after his term was up. He asked the Senate if, as governor of Sicily, he would have the authority to launch an invasion of North Africa. And they were like, no. And then Scipio was like, I might just do it anyway. And then they were like, well, maybe, only if you see a really good opportunity. But the Senate didn't actually want Scipio to invade, so they added,
I mean, if the army is behind him anyway, there's not much that he can really do to really stop him, or that they can really do to stop him if he really wanted to. I mean, I'm guessing in these times anyway, but who knows?
oh, and by the way, we're assigning you 0 legions. But this didn't deter Scipio. He announced that he was accepting volunteers for a North African campaign, and thousands of veterans flooded to Sicily. Most of these men had served against Hannibal, and many of them had even served with Scipio at Cannae. In total, 7,000 men signed up, basically enough for 1.5 legions. Not answerable to the Senate, but to Scipio personally. 1.5 legions wasn't enough to invade North Africa, but it was enough to get the attention of the Senate. They pretended to be impressed by Scipio's initiative, but they were actually terrified. Scipio had already been offered the crown by his men, and now, with the snap of his fingers, he had shown that he was able to raise a small private army. They still thought it was a bad idea, but they let him have his way. Scipio would lead.
See what I'm saying? Like, even if they say no, there's not a lot that they can probably do about it to stop him anyway. Because, I mean, at this time, obviously they're not dealing with the same type of roles that we're dealing with in modern times, where obviously, say, Washington state can't just go in and invade Canada or whatever. They have to, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of crazy thing about, yeah.
A full-fledged invasion of North Africa. This campaign was complicated and it had lots of twists and turns, but it culminated with Hannibal being recalled to defend North Africa, and with the two armies meeting at Zama, a town 5 days' march inland from the coast. The city of Carthage had managed to throw together thousands of raw recruits and at least 80 war elephants to help buttress Hannibal's forces. Now this may surprise you, but there's no internationally recognized symbol for war elephants, so let's quickly make one. Let's take the cavalry, shift the line down like that, and then add a couple of lines at the side, and perfect. When deploying for battle, Hannibal placed his elephants at the front, followed by a line of experienced Gauls and mercenaries from the Italian campaign. This was followed by a line of the new recruits from Carthage. The third line was made up of the core of Hannibal's army from the Italian campaign. I've seen this third line referred to as the most experienced army in human history. In their 16 years on the field, they had never experienced a significant defeat. Hannibal had been unable to bring the majority of his cavalry with him across the Mediterranean, but he had some left and he placed them on the wings.
I don't know, we gotta do more research on how many battles they've gone through, because I mean, there's been so many freaking armies that have gone through so many battles that have never, I mean, we can count the Macedonians with Alexander the Great, we can count, Napoleon's army. There's, I'm sure, a few different soldiers in his army that were with him the entire time that, so we probably got to see how many battles these guys actually fought and won to actually give them that title, because that's a pretty hard fought title if you really think about it, with all the battles throughout all of history. So let's see.
Experienced a significant defeat. Hannibal had been unable to bring the majority of his cavalry with him across the Mediterranean, but he had some left and he placed them on the wings. Scipio set up his army in an unusual way. He had his men form up in 3 lines like normal, but not in the classic checkerboard formation that the Romans liked to use in this period. Instead, he shifted his middle line over and filled the gaps with some light skirmishers. The line may have appeared solid from Hannibal's point of view, but from the top down, we can see that he left big open columns between his maniples. He put his Roman cavalry on his left, and his mounted Numidian allies on his right. The Romans were significantly outnumbered, but with the help of the Numidians they had an advantage when it came to cavalry. The battle opened with a huge elephant charge, which would have been terrifying. We don't know for sure, but this may have been an accidental elephant charge, which is somehow even more terrifying. There's some talk among historians that these elephants may have been newly captured and maybe only half trained, but nobody knows for sure. Anyway, the elephants on the left charged first, got a little confused, veered left, and went straight into the Carthaginian cavalry. The Numidians on the Roman right saw an opportunity and charged without warning. The Carthaginians on this side were in total chaos and fell into a rout almost immediately. Everyone else was like, oh,
Yes, that's the trouble with getting mercenaries. They don't really, like, yeah, they're supposed to follow the general's orders and stuff, but technically they're on their own because they're mercenaries, so kind of crazy though.
Warning. The Carthaginians on this side were in total chaos and fell into a rout almost immediately. Everyone else was like, oh, I guess the battle has started? So Hannibal ordered the rest of his elephants to advance. The Carthaginian objective here was to use the elephants as, well, tanks basically, to disrupt the enemy lines and then have their superior infantry follow up and overwhelm the Romans. But it didn't work. As the elephants closed in, the skirmishers fell back, revealing gaps in the line. Elephants have minds of their own and can't really be trained to do something suicidal, like running into a wall of spears. So they ran into the gaps. This is the moment the Roman skirmishers were waiting for. They pelted the elephants with ranged weapons, killing many and driving the rest off. The elephant threat had now been neutralized, and they had done more damage to the Carthaginians than they had to the Romans. As the battle was heating up, the cavalry on the Roman left clashed with the Carthaginians opposite them. After the initial skirmish, the Carthaginian cavalry turned and fled, with the Romans in hot pursuit. The elephants had been eliminated, and now the cavalry was off the board. Now, Hannibal's 36,000 infantry faced off against Scipio's 23,000. Fortune had favored Rome in the first few clashes, but now that only infantry remained, it was becoming clear that Hannibal had the bigger and better army. Maybe this was all going according to his plan. Maybe the Romans were walking into another trap. Hannibal ordered his first 2 lines forward, keeping his elite third line in reserve. As the 2 sides met, the fighting was immediately intense. The mercenaries and Gauls on the Carthaginian side had a personal enmity towards Rome, and fought like wild men. The Romans fought very conservatively at first, hiding behind their shields and just trying to survive the first wave of attacks. Then, after the enemy began to grow tired, the Romans slowly moved forward, slamming into the Carthaginians with their shields and forcing them to give ground. At this time, some of the mercenaries began to flee and were cut down by their own men. Not great for morale. The Carthaginian second line charged forward and stopped the Roman momentum. The fighting here dragged on for some time with many losses on both sides. The Roman first line was...
I was about to say, if I'm not mistaken, from what he said earlier, a lot of these soldiers were just people who were recruited from the surrounding cities and towns and all that stuff. So they did pretty good going against technically this isn't a technical legion, a professional legion, but these are all, veterans and stuff. So technically it is a legion. So it is pretty impressive that they were able to beat them, or beat them to the point where they did, even though they didn't beat them, but they did pretty good. So
the fighting here dragged on for some time with many losses on both sides. The Roman first line was tore to shreds, and it wasn't until the second line moved up and reinforced them that the stalemate was broken, and the Romans continued their advance. Eventually, the Carthaginian second line was routed. These were new recruits after all. They did pretty well to go toe-to-toe with the Romans for as long as they did. The Roman first line was in tatters. They had fought their way through 2 lines of Carthaginian infantry and had barely survived. All this time, the Carthaginian third line, the core of Hannibal's elite army, hadn't moved. Remember that Hannibal had started this battle with a significant numerical advantage, and had only used his weakest troops. The two armies were now roughly
Essentially,
the same size.
he just used the new recruits and the fresh guys as cannon fodder. As messed up as that is where you pretty much just throw your guys at the enemy, and you know that they're gonna die, but you're doing that for a reason so that you can either slow down your enemy, and exactly what we're seeing here, or so that you can give yourself some time to get yourself, what you need done. But obviously that's not the case. We were saying what the case was the first thing is the fact that he wanted to pretty much soften up the Roman legions. So
remember that Hannibal had started this battle with a significant numerical advantage, and had only used his weakest troops. The two armies were now roughly the same size, more or less, but the Romans had just basically fought an entire battle, while Hannibal's third line, the most experienced army in human history, had yet to even break a sweat. Scipio realized, maybe too late, that this was Hannibal's plan all along. He gave the signal and had his men fall back. The Carthaginians didn't move. The Romans took their time, caught their breath, and reformed their line. Instead of forming up in the normal 3 lines of attack, they repositioned themselves into one solid line, with the tattered first line in the middle, the blooded second line next to them, and the fresh third line at the wings. Weak center, strong wings, just like Hannibal used to do. Neither side had enough men left for any tricks or complicated maneuvers. The Romans just advanced directly into the waiting Carthaginian line, and it was a straight-up brawl. Neither side gave an inch of ground. It was looking like it was going to be a stalemate, until, oh my god, it's the cavalry. They had broken off their pursuit when they figured out that the Carthaginians were deliberately trying to lead them away from the battle. They rode to the rescue and crashed right into the back of Hannibal's third line. After 16 years, Rome had finally pulled off a Hannibal-style maneuver. And that was pretty much it. The Carthaginians fought on bravely, but it was all over. Rome imposed strict peace terms on Carthage and basically made them into a client state. There's a story, probably apocryphal, but whatever, that years later, when Hannibal was asked about his legacy, he would say that if not for the Battle of Zama, he would have been remembered as the greatest general of all time. It sounds like an empty boast, but then you go down the resume. Trebia, Trasimene, Cannae. It might be true.
alright guys, so yeah, definitely I would definitely want to do some more on stuff on Carthage and Hannibal and all that stuff, because there's a lot of debating on Hannibal, because obviously we don't even know what the man looked like, because the bust that we have that's so popular that makes him look like a European pretty much is from 200 years after his death. You can't use that, you know what I'm saying? And then the only picture that we have of him is on a coin, and the only reason we think it's him is because the elephant that's on the back of the coin looks just like his war elephant, where it's like the elephant's tusk was missing or broken off, I think, or something like that. And on the coin, it looks just like that. And on the front of the coin, it looks like an African man, looks like with African features and all that stuff. So we don't know what he looks like. If he was, of a Berber descent, or if he was of more of a Latin African descent, but we don't really know. But me personally, I'm tending to go with more of the thing that was more of the time, like the coin. The coin was actually made when he was alive, whereas the bust of him, the statue, was made literally 200 years. It just doesn't make sense why people use that as of him. But in any case, so thank you guys again for joining me on another episode of Mike's Intellectual Corner. If you guys liked the episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys when I see you. I'm out.